on just cut number 4. Give him a little slice of Syd so that people know what we're talking about.
Blazing in the foggy dew.
Yeah. I mean, cuckoo clock. I mean,
blazing in the boggy dew. Yeah. So right from the beginning, you had this difference between the two.
Clearly,
and they probably couldn't have coexisted in the band together. I have a quote from Nick Mason. We're going to be dropping in some interview segments that some stuff that Matt found, and also stuff that I have talked to Nick Mason, the drummer, at length, and to David Gilmour. And he was talking about the differences between Roger's style of songwriting and Syd's, and so I think this is on point. And then you're going to play a full Syd Barrett song, but this is Nick Mason from Pink Floyd.
The realization that actually people are almost more fascinated with Syd burning out after 1 year than they are of Roger leaving after 20.
Yeah.
There's a fascination. I mean, and I still have a great. It's funny. I was listening to some of the early stuff fairly recently, and Syd was the natural. I mean, he was exactly as you described, the romantic view of, the guy who could just spin it off. Whereas Roger absolutely worked like, he taught himself to become a songwriter and worked at it like mad.
Yeah.
Whereas Syd didn't. Syd just, curled off these lyrics, and even when he was sort of struggling with his solo things, I mean, it was all just sort of almost stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
So, yes, it's fascinating to wonder what it would have led to or might have led to.
Yeah, what it would have led to or might have led to. He's obviously talking about Barrett's departure from the band, which is the theme of this show, because as soon as this first album is over, Barrett's out of the picture, and yet he isn't really. He's a shadow that casts over everything else the band does, and we're going to trace that shadow as we go on with Sound Opinions. But Greg Kot, you're going to play a song that sets up kind of the ultimate Syd Barrett.
Syd Barrett was a great guitar player. One of the things we ought to point out about Syd Barrett is he really was a truly, if you could say one thing about him, besides the whimsy and the sort of esoteric, purely Englishness of the lyrics, is the guitar playing. He wasn't technically as gifted a guitar player as David Gilmour, but the innovations he brought to guitar playing are significant. He was one of the first guys to introduce that slide into rock guitar playing. He was also using those echo boxes and wah-wah pedals in a way that was really innovative for that particular time period.
It's really kind of a chicken or egg thing, because apparently David Gilmour and Syd Barrett went to school together, and they were mates, and they learned to play guitar as teenagers would, sitting around in the bedroom together. So Barrett, came out with a lot of those innovations, which are considered Gilmour innovations now. Gilmour says, "Well, I taught Syd a lot of that stuff
when we were teenagers."
Yeah, but it's hard to say. So maybe Syd taught it to Gilmour.
The thing is, they're both brilliant musicians, and it's really it adds poignance to what we're going to talk about later, because they were buds. They did sort of learn from each other. Gilmour was the guy who sort of slid into the band as it was obvious that Syd could no longer pull his weight as he was cracking up.
Let's play Lucifer Sam and then talk about what happened to Barrett to get out of the band.
All right, Lucifer Sam from the Pink Floyd, from the Piper at the Gates of Dawn record on XRT's Sound Opinions. Here's a song about a Siamese cat, a guy's Siamese cat, and it sounds sort of spooky and spacey and nocturnal and very, a kind of an innocent song, and yet...
Well, there's a mystical element. A lot of those lyrics are taken directly from the I Ching, which is, talk about your summer of love idea, cliche. But at the same time, there's this rock underpinning, because can you name the Bo Diddley song that it's ripping off?
Yeah, it was an old R&B song. God,
I ain't got you.
Ain't got you.
I ain't got you. So it's it's got exactly. Except it's taken somewhere completely different with the echo unit, with that descending riff and the weird lyrics.
Showing how they came out of that R&B blues thing and immediately started twisting it, taking it, spiraling it outward.
So here they are before the release of the album in '67, talking about that.
We didn't start out trying to get anything new, It entirely happened. We originally started virtually as an R&B group. Yeah. Sometimes we just sort of let loose a bit and started hitting the guitar a bit harder and not worrying quite so much about the chords. It stopped being sort of third-rate academic rock, It started being sort of intuitive groove, really. It's free form. And it's not like jazz music, because we all want to be pop stars, we don't want to be jazz music. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we play for people to dance to. They don't seem to dance much now, but that's the initial idea. So we play loudly, and we're playing with electric guitars. So, I mean, we're utilising all the volume and all the effects you can get. But now, in fact, we're trying to develop this by using the light. Yes, of course.
But the thing about the jazz thing is that we don't have this great musician thing, you know. We don't really look upon ourselves as musicians as such, you know, period. Reading the dots and all that stuff.
So that's Syd Barrett and Roger Waters talking to the CBC in 67.
A reference to the future greatest hits album called A Collection of Great Dance Songs.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a very sarcastic look. But, you know, to actually have Syd Barrett talking seriously about them as being a dance band
right.
at one time.
Well, the thing that strikes me about that little snip of tape is that Waters sounds like the one who's stoned and wiggy.
Yeah.
And Barrett seems like the lucid boss of the band.
Yeah, exactly.
The lower voice there that was Waters. Well, he certainly gave them enough to write about, and that's what we're going to be looking at, because he promptly disappears from the scene, except for one track on the second album, Saucerful of Secrets. The last track, Jug Band Blues, is a Barrett track.
Right.
But otherwise, he's out of the band.
And he was getting pushed out. It was not a pretty scene. This was
ugly.
This was not like, oh, Syd,
yeah.
you know, thank you.
No, it was his band. He founded it.
You know, Roger Waters is a pretty mean guy at that time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, basically saying, you know, you're not cutting it anymore. Get the hell out of here. They conspired against this guy basically to get him out of the band. They basically started taking the stage without telling Syd.
Well, he was melting down.
He was melting down, seriously.
There's a great book called, literally Melting Down, Saucerful of Secrets, The Pink Floyd Odyssey, is a classic book by Nicholas Schaffner, who was a musician writer, since died of AIDS. I got to speak to him once, was a really great guy and a great writer. And this is, my idea of a good rock and roll biography. Well reported, insightful criticism, fascinating journalism, and the classic Barrett story is that he went on stage with them one night, right before going on stage, took an entire jar of Brill cream, the English equivalent of it, and put it in his frizzy perm, and crushed a bottle of Mandrax pills, which was the English equivalent of Quaaludes.
Right,
crushed them up and put them on in the Brill cream. And so he went out on stage, and under the hot lights of the stage, he began to literally looked as if his face was melting off. And he stood there and he played one note. And it wasn't even the right note. He was getting further and further away from reality. There's ugly sides that often, there's a romanticization of Barrett's meltdown that we're going to talk about, which we want to promptly nip in the bud. He was beating his girlfriends. He was taking drugs. He was doing nasty stuff. This was not all like the wiggy madcap running around. They thought maybe Barrett could just write songs for Pink Floyd, and they could go out and they'd get this new guy, Barrett's mate, David Gilmour, to play guitar. I talked to Gilmour around the time that the Pink Floyd box set came out in 1994, 95, and obviously whenever you're talking about the history of the Floyd, you eventually get to this question. So here's what David Gilmour said a couple of years ago.
Going back and doing some of that stuff on Arnold Lane and Candy and a Currant Bun and also parts of Saucerful, it must make you think of Syd Barrett and his state today. What it's an old question you're asked a million times, but especially when you're doing something retrospective like this, do you think about that and what kind of group it could have been if he hadn't dropped out of the music world?
Well, if he hadn't dropped out of the music world, I wouldn't have got the job. So.
Well, that's true. Well, wasn't it a 5-piece for like a short time there?
Yes, it was a 5-piece. It was a 5-piece for about a month, but it was a 5-piece only because Syd had lost it completely. So, I don't really wonder about what it would have been if Syd had stayed in it. Who knows? It may have faded away to nothing within 2 more years, or not. Who knows? I've no idea. That's kind of pointless speculation, but I do keep in touch with Syd's family, and I know how he's doing and everything like that. But,
well, these projects must be good for him to keep the money coming in.
Yes, helps keep him afloat.
Are you? Do you ever? There's a whole phenomenon of him having become this cult figure and people being so fascinated in him still. Does that strike you as odd, or are you surprised by it at all?
Well, I'm not really surprised by it. He was a very charismatic figure, and he did write some wonderful songs. So I'm not really surprised by it. But obviously, you can say of anyone who whose career was cut off in its prime or who died young, James Dean or anyone else, that they are considered as wonderful, and because they never grew old and show us all their weaknesses,
Yeah.
I have no idea.